Hello and welcome to this episode of the Employee to Boss podcast. I cannot wait for you to listen to this amazing episode with my guest, Julie Vertzayias. We are talking all about healing the entrepreneurial spirit, which I think is a topic that we all need to know a little bit more about because as entrepreneurs, there's a lot of hard things that we have to go through and a lot of soul searching that we need to do and a lot of personal growth that we need to have to actually run a successful business. It's more than just, saying you're a business owner one day and the next day sending out invoices. There's a lot of personal growth that needs to happen. So let me tell you a little bit more about Julie. Julie is a holistic practitioner focusing on finding fulfillment in self and life through inner child healing, shadow work, human design, Reiki energy healing, and tarot readings. She loves diving deep into the depths of what holds us back in life by going into the past fully to let go and heal in order to allow the new desires to come to the present. Her focus with human design and spiritual practices allows her to ask the right questions with her clients to overcome obstacles and roadblocks and begin shifting their perspective on life. So we're talking all about Julie's journey from employee to boss. We're talking about her own transformative path, and she's also sharing some marketing tips that she has learned in her business because in a job like this with mindset and spiritual practices, a lot of the times a client needs to come to you. You can't necessarily go to them because they need to be ready. So we dive all up into that as well. If you have any questions about anything in this episode, my links are in the show notes along with Julie's. You can reach out to her on her website or on Instagram, but I cannot wait for you to hear this full episode, so please enjoy. Hey Julie, thank you so much for joining me on the Employee to Boss podcast. You are actually the first interview I'm doing in my new space, so bear with me as we set up. I have a whole podcast studio idea set up for this corner, like in my head. It's just going to come to fruition when it can. So thank you for being my first guest in the new space. I'm really excited for this conversation.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. And I love it that you're in a new space. It's kind of cool, like new beginnings,
Mm-hmm.
summer season. I think it's very much in line with everything.
Yeah, and I was actually thinking this is like the perfect episode to record in the new space since we're going to talk a lot about like healing your inner child, like our business mindset, and it just feels like very fresh. And so I'm really excited to get into this episode. But if you wanted to start off by telling us who you are and what you do, I would love to hear that.
So my name is Julie, as you introduced me earlier. I am a holistic practitioner. So my focus is on really helping people go back into the past and heal whatever is holding them back. So things such as patterns, like repetitive patterns, like, the same cycle happening over and over, and people can't seem to shift or break away, usually comes from a rooted place. And so using tools such as inner child healing, shadow work, human design, Reiki energy healing, and I also do tarot readings, like all that combination. I kind of take that on a very intuitive, but then also like logical way of like asking questions to go back and figure out where does it stem from to create that awareness to slowly begin to heal instead of putting band-aid solutions and like trying to fix something.
I'm excited to get into this conversation because a lot of entrepreneurs, when we go from working in corporate and having an employee mindset, it's much different when you go into your own business and have your boss mindset, to go with the name of the podcast, right? It's very, very different mindsets that you have to have, not even if you have a team. I think managing ourselves is like a whole nother beast. You might be great in your personal life, you might have discipline, and then you start your own business and you're like, what do I do now? No one's telling me what to do. I have to set deadlines for myself. Maybe you have client deliverables, but that's basically it, right? And so it's a whole other thing of its own that a lot of people don't think about. It's not talked about very much in business.
And it's not. It isn't. And it's, I have said this like to a few people before, and that entrepreneurship journey is a self-healing journey. It's the most inner
Mm.
work you'll do on yourself. Whether you do it like super consciously aware and like journal, and or you're just someone who listens to podcasts and reads books, like everybody does healing differently. It is a very big healing journey because you'll realize that the things that you try to fix or band-aid solutions in the long term, they're not sustainable in the long term. You end up in patterns and cycles of it not working, especially like if you're trying to sell like a product or a service. And so it is not talked about a lot. And I have spoken to some entrepreneurs who actually like ended up going back to the corporate world because they couldn't they couldn't do it, but they also
Mhm.
didn't know where to look, where to ask for help, where to see like, oh wait, is there another way? They think that this is like the only way to do something and that's it. And if it doesn't work, then okay, we'll just, you know, kind of get rid of it and then just go back to what we know. And it's so easy to go back to what you know.
Yeah, back to the drawing board like multiple times a year for sure. But tell us about your journey from employee to boss. So, what did you used to do? How do you do what you do now? And what was that journey looking like?
Oh my god, the journey is like still continuing, never ends. But it's all part of enjoying the journey of it. So about, I think it was must be now 8 years ago. Now I'm trying to remember.
Mm.
I when I was working in corporate, I actually used to work for Airbnb at the head office in Montreal. And the job itself, like for me, it was like easy. Like I knew what I was doing. I loved the environment. I did. I loved the people that I worked with, like made like some of the best friends there. Like it was a very good, healthy work environment. And but during that time, I went through a breakup. And then all of a sudden I started thinking in my head, I'm like, oh, what if there's something more to life? And going through the process of the breakup and all of it, when I thought my life was going in one direction, I had this idea. And, you know, it was like going up the corporate ladder, getting married, buying a house, white picket fence. That was the idea. And then all of a sudden that was gone. And I was like, well, now what? And it wasn't that I didn't or did want it anymore. I was just more curious of like, well, what's next? And I started working with a coach, and I ended up doing her coaching certification. And that's kind of how it all started. It's been a long journey. There's many, many stories within this journey since then. I left the corporate world 6 years ago and jumped in my car, drove across Canada, moved out here to British Columbia, moved to Whistler. When I first got here, I freaked out about a little bit about the cost of living because coming from Montreal at that time, the cost of living was a lot lower than out here. And so I ended up picking up two jobs. I worked at a restaurant and I worked at Lululemon. And I was doing workshops with Lululemon. So that was kind of cool. Like I was still kind of like dabbling into it. But I think at that time, I didn't know who my ideal client was. I didn't know what to focus on. And then yeah, there was one day where I was like, oh, I want to get a tarot reading. And I went down to Vancouver and I just walked in, and this woman, she did read my card. She was bang on, and she's like, you're an old soul, and you know, like, aren't you spiritual? And I was like, no, I'm not. And then from there, it all just kind of, things started making sense. Like in terms of like I was feeling certain things and I didn't know what was happening. So then I worked with a spiritual mentor, and that's when I dove into inner child healing and really healed a lot of deep wounds from the past. And
Yeah.
it still comes up now, but I really went through a period where I dove deep into my own self-worth, and I didn't focus so much on my business at that time because I was really going through it, because I didn't believe I was worthy. I didn't believe that I was good enough and that, you know, I can meet someone, have a successful business. And so I really dove in. And then from there, that is when I started saying, like, oh, like I love doing this kind of work with people. don't get me wrong, the life coaching aspect is fun. What are your goals? What are your dreams? Like, let's set a vision. Let's, create the to-do list to make it happen, put it out there. But diving deep with someone and being like, well, wait, what's really going on? Asking the questions of, well, why do you think that? And why does it have to be that way? And showing them different perspectives and different ways of seeing something. I was like, oh no, this is me. This is like so me. And I cannot not go deep, like with my clients. Like, and I usually sometimes, like, if I hear something and I'm like, okay, I need to tap into that, I'll be like, okay, we're gonna go deep. Like, let me know when it's too much, like setting the boundaries, right? Because like not everybody is at a place to hold it all the time. But that is basically how I started really doing the inner child healing, shadow work, and also using human design as a system to support that, because human design really gives you like the signposts of like where to look, which is really interesting as well.
Yeah, no, I love that it all kind of started with obviously the breakup and then seeing what is more in life.
Yeah.
And when I went through like my very first breakup, someone was like, "Oh, congratulations." And I was like, "What the hell? Like that's so mean." But thinking about it, like I know what she means now. Like that's truly when you have so much self-growth and it's like, yeah, congratulations. Amazing. Like thank you for, starting this journey in myself, right? And so that's an amazing journey that you went on. And really, it sounds like you had to trust yourself a lot, even if you really didn't, getting this tarot reading, like, okay, let's see what the cards say. Let's see what the universe says, right? And at that time, it sounds like you weren't spiritual. So, what were some of the things that you started to do to become spiritual? And other than, this mentor, how did you actually start to learn tarot and human design? There's a lot to it.
There is, and I love that you asked this question because I don't think anybody has asked this to me before. So tarot cards. I'll start with tarot. Tarot ended up through my mentor, because in the mentorship process with her, it was to tap into my intuition. So not only it was healing and inner child healing, but it was how can I tune into my body, tune into also the universe and the signs, and learning what my clairs were. And so we practice a lot with like the senses, the body, and then she had me get tarot cards. And from there, without, in the beginning, it was not looking at the definition online or anything. It was very much like, okay, here's this card. What do you think it means? And it was practicing that. And then sometimes she wouldn't even show me the card. And she's like, which card? Like, what do you
Mm,
think the card I'm holding means? And it started as a way to straighten my intuition and to really tune in. And then from there, I just started doing it on myself. I started doing it for friends. And then next thing you know, I was like, this is so much fun. And so now I do offer it as a service for someone who needs guidance. Like, the way I kind of do it is like, you need guidance, but you're not at a place, either two ways. You're not at a place where you can invest in a long-term commitment and you need that one thing, or it's, you want to try me out. And
mm.
that's like kind of like a nice way to kind of get a feel of like how, my sessions are. And then as for human design, I got introduced it by other coaches, and I learned about it 4 years ago, and I'm still learning. It's human design. There's so many levels, and I'm learning more and more about myself, like every time, going deeper. And it's through books, really, like the human design books that I have. And I just continue to learn, and I learn through when I have client sessions, like, because I'll do like the sessions, I'll read up on everything to try and get it, like, create the session for them, like where they're at, and then I'll read some things that correspond to my chart, and I was like, oh right, that thing. And then, so I'm always learning. And now I do in-person workshops with that.
Oh, I
Yeah.
love the how it's, like, adapting as you go, and I actually have a tarot card tattoo at the
Yeah.
sun on my arm, which
Oh, I
but,
love
I
that.
mean, I love tarot. I think that it's, like you're saying, really a great way to point you in the right direction, and some of the things that I've like my sister does really good tarot readings, so she'll do some for me, and I'm like, "No, that's wrong," and then it ends up being right. And so I think it's nice to kind of have that reassurance. So I'm curious, when you were, obviously going on your healing journey and learning about all these different modalities or tools to use, how do you now like tailor that to business owners and to the clients that you help?
Yeah, so usually the one thing for me, like the main point is like looking at patterns or cycles, repetitive cycles that an entrepreneur is in that they don't want to be in anymore. And it's like it's one of those things that you've tried everything, right? Because there's one thing of like something's happening, either you're plateauing in your business or you want to make more money, but you don't know how to raise your prices, or you're constantly hustling and you want to slow down, but you don't know how. All these little things, like what we do, I find maybe not everybody, but I would say majority, what we do is initially we try to find what is the next step to do.
Mhm.
So it's very much like, well, like I want to make more money. Okay, so then I'll create more programs, or I want to make more money. I'm just going to raise my prices. But then if those things flop and they just are not sustainable in the long run, then that's when you go back to the drawing board and then you try to find the next thing to do. And it's like, it's this constant, I feel like throwing spaghetti on the wall and seeing what sticks with the entrepreneurial world. And it's like we're constantly just trying to do that. And I've done it too. But sometimes it's something on the subconscious level.
Mhm.
Sometimes it's something that is a story or a belief that you're telling yourself about, raising your prices, or about the hustling mentality. And I actually do want to talk a little bit about the hustling one, because for me, that's something I'm currently navigating right now. And it's, I've always known my whole life that, like I need to work to make money. And now I'm at a place that I'm like, it's not sustainable. Like, I'm getting sick, I'm getting burnt out. It's not sustainable. Like, yes, I'm making money, but is it my health really worth it? And I'm
Mhm.
starting to question it of if there's another way to go about this. But first, I wanted to create the awareness of like, where does it stem from? And this can be something so simple. Doesn't mean like inner child healing and shadow work, like doesn't always mean that it has to be something super traumatic. Sometimes it is, but sometimes it's something so simple. And for me, it was when I was 12 years old. My dad had a restaurant, so he was working 24/7. My mom was working her 9 to 5, and she was taking care of my younger sister. And I went ahead at 12 years old saying, I want to make money. I want to buy my own clothes, because that was my thing. I wanted to buy my wanted to buy what I wanted to buy.
Yeah.
And I went to my dad and I was like, I want to work at your restaurant. And I started simple by like making coffees, making sandwiches. He had like a little coffee shop. And that's where it started. It started of
Mhm.
like, okay, you go to work and then here's your money. And but is that the only way to really receive money? Is that the only way to really do it? And so this is what I'm saying, like, sometimes it just comes from like, that place of it's not necessarily bad, it's just a version of you that you knew. And if you're ready to put the version aside by going back to the past and seeing where it stems from and why, it creates that awareness.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I know it's like these small events in our lives that's really made us who we are for better or for worse, Like, yes, you have a work ethic, but maybe you're hustling too hard and maybe you're like money is the only way I can have freedom or something along those lines.
Exactly.
And I think as you're saying, all of us have those beliefs. And so for anyone who maybe has a belief, whether it be not wanting to start their own business because they don't think that they're worthy of a business or no one wants to work with them, or anyone maybe in corporate and they're like, I don't deserve a raise. Like, I'm going to ask and they're going to say no, so I just won't ask. Or anyone who doesn't want to post on social media because they don't want to show their face because people are going to make fun of them. These are all beliefs. And what's like the first thing you tell anyone with one of these limiting beliefs?
Well, first they got to be open to going in that journey. So the minute someone works with me, it's like I know they're ready. No doubt about it. I always tell myself like the people that come into my world, like I manifest the clients that are ready for this. And usually I always start with seeing where they're at. So what is it that they're trying to do? What is it that they're trying to accomplish? And then from there I say okay, like, and sometimes I've had clients come for like business related things where it's like, okay, I want to grow my followers on Instagram, or I want to make more money in my business. But then I've also had people come to me and say like, I have a problem with overeating, or struggling in my relationship. And I'm like, okay, cool, we know what it is, but now we're going to take away that, because
Mhm.
that is not what I want. I don't want to fix. I don't want to do a band-aid solution. I don't want to do a temporary, like, okay, like let's try this or let's try that. It's like, no, okay, now we're going to go inward and see where you're at. And everybody is at somewhere different. And so usually I guide them through a meditation, like in session, and then we talk about the meditation of what came up after, and that is to dive into the subconscious, is to see where they are at subconsciously. Where is their inner child at? Is their inner child happy? Are they sad, or do they feel abandoned? Do they feel hurt? What age are they at? And then from there you look at, okay, so what was happening around that time? And most of the time, they're like, oh, well, I totally thought I was over this.
Hmm.
But then you start listening to how they're speaking to themselves about the situation, and they're brushing it off. So imagine now you have a kid come to you and they're like, this teacher said something mean to me. And then you just tell the kid, well, just get over it. Would you really talk to the kid like that? So why do you talk to yourself like that?
Mhm.
And that is like, a lot of times it's like, yeah, it could be something that we're aware of or unaware of. But if we are aware of it, we're like, well, that was no big deal. But would you tell a kid that was no big deal when they come to you?
Yeah. Yeah. I That's such a good point, and we're so mean to ourselves, aren't we? We're so mean to ourselves. But that's a great way to think of it, like, if a kid came to you, would you say the same thing to them? A lot of people, they might hear this episode and think, "Yeah, I totally want that, but I'm not ready to, like, dive into this part of my life." Like, I'm not ready to really, like, tear open my life and rebuild the parts that are broken, because that's something that you can't force in people, right? That's something that they have to really decide on their own. So, two questions with this. What can people do to like prepare to maybe working with you, to maybe prepare to be open about it? And then I have a business-based question of, you know, since you can't force anyone to work with you or like force anyone to open up in this way, how do you like maybe make an invitation to come work with you in a way that they can like be open to it?
Okay. I'm gonna start with the first one, because the first one is like right in my head
Yeah.
now. And so for the first one, to create that invitation, this is where I have you can tap into tarot readings or Reiki energy healing with me. And these are introductory offers. Like, I won't, unless I have your permission. Like in tarot reading, I will, like, if the cards are telling me to go deep in something, I will ask permission. But this
Mhm.
is how I make them inviting, because the energy of like a Reiki energy healing session or a tarot reading is a lot lighter than it is if you go in a 3-month container of inner child healing and shadow work. So that is how I do it in the online space. In the in-person space is right now I'm doing the human design workshops, and that's kind of how I'm tapping into that. And I'm going to try out meetups and see how that works. And so that is it is a learning process. I'm still figuring it out, but I think as an entrepreneur you're always trying to figure it out,
Yeah.
because I do know that the work is in depth, and I want someone to be ready, or well, ready in the sense of like, yeah, I'm scared, but let's go kind of thing, versus someone not. Because if someone isn't, then the sessions can be triggering. Then like it might not come out the way someone want to, because there'll be that wall of like, well, no,
Yeah.
or
Right.
might not be able to see it. Like I've had one client a long time ago, and she thought she was ready and we went for it. I think it was like 2 sessions. By the way, the sessions don't, the contract ends a lot sooner, but it was like just 2 sessions, and I was like trying to go, and she's like, but I don't, she was like, I don't get it. It was
Mm.
like she was blocked, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. And then we honored it, that it was time to end it. But that's usually like, I want someone to be at a place to be ready, because when you're ready, then you're going to notice the shifts, and you're going to notice like not only the thing that you're trying to like, shift, and the cycle or pattern you're trying to break, but it ripples out to other areas in your life. And I've known that for myself. Like my inner work has not only brought me better as a business like owner and entrepreneur and lady boss, but it is also allowed me to show up in my relationships differently, relationships with my parents differently, relationships with my partner, with my sister, with like my friends. And that has made me better. So it's not just like one aspect. You're not there to like, I'm not here to be like, okay, let's just focus on this one thing. It's like, let's go deep, and then let's allow it to all ripple.
Yeah. No, I love that. And I like how, you were doing this, like you were definitely your first client and you figure this all out for yourself before you can help other people. And I'm sure, I'm thinking for me, I'm a podcast manager. Everything I do is very black or white. People come to me, they're like, I want to start a podcast. I'm like, cool, let's start your podcast, get it set up. It's very technical, but yours is all mindset. So I'm curious, what are some like marketing tips you have for promoting yourself in something that people need to be ready for? People, whenever they come to me, I know they're ready to start a podcast. But for you, it sounds like they are ready. At least they believe they are. But you have to do some like prep work in your marketing probably to say, this is what I offered, this is who it's for, but this is how you know you're ready.
Yeah. And yeah, so that has been in terms of like marketing. I mean, that again has been a really big learning process for me, of trying to figure out what works for me and what doesn't.
Mm.
I know recently the past, yeah, since I would say the beginning of this year, I have let go of the marketing myself over the online space.
Yeah.
It was something that I tried to do for over 2, 3 years. Uh,
Yeah, because I'm sure people need to listen to you to understand, like, we met at a networking event and, like, building those personal connections definitely is a big difference than posting and saying, like, "Here's my service."
Exactly. And that is what my focus is now. It's like it's taking away from the online space wasn't for me now. I don't know. Maybe it might shift in, a year from now, 5 years from now. I have no idea. I don't believe that one strategy is the way all the time. But right now my focus is on building, like through networking events and in-person events. And so this is why I'm starting the workshops, and I'm trying to find ways to be like, okay, how can I branch out? Because right now I'm just offering them in Whistler. So I'm like, okay, how can I branch out to Vancouver or other parts of British Columbia? And then who knows? So I'm playing around with that, because I feel that when someone meets me, like if I get that one-to-one connection of someone in person, then it's all of a sudden like, okay, I get it. Like they get it. They're like, okay, like, yes, this makes sense. Whereas the online space, I don't know, maybe it was my messaging. I don't know what it was, but it was just like I was felt like I kept like hitting walls. And I was just kind of like I tried different strategies, different techniques, and it didn't work for me in the past 2, 3 years.
Yeah.
So I am preferring more of the in-person events and the networking, like the online networking events are also really good that like focus primarily, but I do think that that is for someone who does mindset work, it's going to be different for anybody. And then that I can even go and say like if you look at your human design, that is like where you can find different ways on how to market what's correct for you based on your
Mm. Oh,
and
that's so interesting. I didn't know that.
some aspects of my human design. Like in terms of like so like there's an aspect of human design that tells you what's your correct environment and mine is markets. So anywhere that is like, markets but networking is a correct environment. But then also like if you think of markets, it's like, a bunch of different things everywhere, right? So what I started doing is like putting my business cards in different bulletin boards around town because it's like different spots, different locations. So it's like playing around with like the human design aspect. Like, and there's so many aspects of human design that you can look at to see like how you can like utilize it for your business, but it is like utilizing it for yourself as well. It's not just the business. It's like, okay, how can I like utilize this for my life? And then I kind of, yeah, take a little bit of that, but it has been a lot of learning, a lot of like, what do I believe about myself? Again, going into that like inner healing, right? Of like, I really had to sit with myself and ask myself, like, why am I still posting on social media? Or why do I feel like I need to do this? And it came from a place that I thought it was the only way to market. Came from that mentality of like, well, all the other coaches are doing it, so I must do it too. Like, and oh, well, it's free advertising and all these like stories that you hear about it. But
Yeah.
different ways to market yourself. There's always another way. It's just a matter of getting curious. That's usually like, show me another way. Like, let me see this differently. How can I see this differently?
I love that. Curiosity is really, I think, what entrepreneurs need. We can get so stuck in the narrow vision of just going straight towards our goals, but sometimes when we reach those goals, it might not be exactly what we thought it was going to be all along.
Yeah.
So I absolutely love that you have the tools and everything that you need really to access these answers that you might be looking for. And I'm curious, how do you work with your clients? Is it only in person or can you work with anyone anywhere?
I work with anyone anywhere. I do in person, but then I also do Zoom as well, like Zoom meetings.
Yeah.
And sometimes if I have I am visiting like a certain area and I have a client there, like either it's like, okay, let's have an in-person session, or if time doesn't allow, to at least meet for coffee, because it is nice like when you have your clients online and then you're like, oh, I get to actually hug you and and see you in person. And so yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah.
I've really enjoyed learning about your story. I mean, it's so different than what a lot of other entrepreneurs come on this podcast and talk about how they used to work in marketing and then they start their own marketing, or they used to work in sales, now they teach sales. You made an entire 180 on your life, right? Like you used to work in and then you weren't even spiritual when you left your job. And I think that that is really showing the power of really trusting yourself and doing this work. And so, like, I just feel really inspired by your story and really appreciate you sharing all the aspects of it.
Well, thank you so much. And thank you for asking these wonderful questions. Like, I enjoyed your questions a lot. I was like, well, I'm like, she's making me think here. And this is like, but in a good way. I'm like, oh, this is nice. It is really nice.
Oh, thank you. Is there anything else that you want to share with the listeners?
I think that if you if there's a part of you inside that is like, I think I'm ready, but I'm scared, because I have heard this before where people are afraid to open that box because they think it's like Pandora's box, but it's not that bad. And you do get through it. That is one thing, you do get through it. And by doing it with someone there to support you as like a coach, a mentor, a spiritual mentor, is it makes the process, you have someone holding that space for you. So that's like what I just wanted to kind of say, because I think a lot of people are afraid of this work sometimes because they're afraid of what they'll unleash. And that fear is valid. I'm not invalidating that fear, but know that we always make it bigger in our head than it actually is.
Totally. Totally. And you've been saying this whole time, like, it's not like you're going to go into one meeting with you and you're going to dive into their childhood, right? You're gonna slowly get there and see what they're ready for, what they're not ready for, and yeah, I think that definitely you could do this work probably maybe on your own, and it would take forever, and you really wouldn't get to the root, or you could have someone guide you through it and really figure out what is going on, like, safely, where you feel safe.
Exactly, exactly. And I myself have worked with different practitioners, mentors, and continue to do so. Like, I think it was like a month ago, like I was having a day and I'm like, I am having a panic attack, so I'm going to message my mentor and see when I can book a session, because I want support right now because of what I'm
Mhm.
going through. And it just happened she was available that day, which was pretty
Oh,
awesome.
amazing.
Yeah. And but it's like, it's okay to ask for help, and by doing it with someone, especially when they can shift the perspective, they can show it to you in a different lens that you yourself haven't seen, right? Because all we see is this. And then someone else comes in the picture and they're like, "Okay, but there's this, and then
Mhm.
there's this, and then that can in itself provide calmness to, the stress, the anxiety, the panic. It's like, oh, okay, okay, I'm okay, I'm alive, I'm good, I can feel my body.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. No, I love that. So, what are the 3 action steps you're going to challenge the audience with this week? So, instead of them just listening to this episode and turning it off, I really like to give them 3 things to do that they can accomplish after this episode is over. So, what do you challenge them to do this week?
Okay. So I would challenge, first and foremost, is doing anything of a meditative practice. That is, it can be like actually sitting down in a meditation, guided or silent. It could be going out in nature, doing a meditative walk. I think any form of meditative practice is important. It allows us to tune into our body, into our intuition. And the more we begin to listen to the body, the more we are in tune with ourselves. And even if you already do a meditation practice, try something new this week. Do a different one. Do one that you haven't tried on before. So that'll be the first one. The second one would be a journal prompt if you choose to dive in. So, what is a current pattern that you have been noticing in your life that is just happening over and over, and you're like, don't understand why? Get curious. What is the pattern? And start there, getting curious of what it looks like. How, like, maybe not how many times it's happened, but like, what are the times it happened? What was popping up? And then to make it a little more interesting, if you want to go a little deeper, would be each time the pattern happened, what did you actually learn from it? And then, because every
Mhm.
time a pattern happens, we're always learning something. Now, to break the pattern, that's a deeper level, but you can get started there. And then the third one, maybe pick a day. This will kind of be fun. Pick a day where you're not doing anything and you don't plan to do anything, and just be and see what happens, see what comes up in your environment, see who messages you, see who you bump into, but let yourself be guided by the universe. So just,
Mm, that's
just,
hard sometimes.
yeah, yeah,
I've been so busy lately with moving, and then I just ran a half marathon over the weekend, and I was sitting on my couch, like, after, I was like, "I haven't been bored in a while." I think that I need to be bored for a day.
yeah, yeah. Or it's just like, just be. And then
Yeah,
something comes up, like someone messages you to do something, like tune in, see what your body feels, right? And then kind of go yes or no. Or if you're like, I feel called to go into this coffee shop, maybe walk into this coffee shop, but just no plans. Don't plan.
I love that. I love
Yeah.
all 3 of those. Thank you so much for sharing, and thanks for sharing your story. Where can people connect with you?
Yeah. So you can find me on my website, juliesunknown.com. And then I do, even though I'm not actively on social media, I do have Instagram, Julie's Unknown as well. So
Perfect. And if people
is-
message you on there, you'll get it, or is the website the best way?
both is good. I'm still like on Instagram. I'm just like not marketing on it. But
Yeah, it's a good messaging tool for sure. So, I'll put both of those in the show notes, and thanks so much for joining me.
thank you so much for having me. This was a wonderful conversation.
Thank you for listening to the Employee to Boss podcast. If you made it to the end of this episode, I hope that you implement the actionable steps from this week's experts so you can get started with your business today. Please rate, review, and subscribe to the Employee to Boss podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. It helps more than you could ever imagine. Remember, a little progress each day leads to big results. We come out with a new episode every Tuesday. To access our show notes, transcripts, and courses, please check out espressopodcastproduction.com.